Hello everybody, it's Glitter Informer. I'm really sorry for how long it took for the last review to come out. I recently started a new job and I have a lot of training to do for it, so I've been really busy lately. Honestly, this review is probably going to be late too. Hopefully once I'm finally done with all of the training and finally have my hours set, I can have more time to work on videos, but I'm not so sure. So, remember at the end of last episode where I was like, whoa, Tsubasa finally figured out how to fly? Well, I was mistaken. Sorry about that. It just looked that way because literally the last shot of the episode was Tsubasa midair. But the very beginning of this episode shows that after jumping off the hill, Tsubasa immediately falls flat on his face. So now how is Tsubasa gonna get over to L? The answer is by curling up into a ball and rolling down the hill. Before we continue on with the adventures of Tsubasa, I wanted to touch back on an important event that happened last episode, and that's when L followed Cure Sky and Cure Prism into the city in the first place. This event's obviously a pretty big deal, since it's the whole reason the plot of this episode's happening. But as user Ready for Adventure on the Pretty Cure Wiki pointed out in their review of this episode, it doesn't make much sense when you think about it. Like, I get that L didn't want to abandon Sky and Prism as they were heading out into danger, but realistically, what was she gonna do about it? But then again, last time she accompanied them into battle, she was able to give them new disc thingies to perform a new attack with, which literally saved their lives. So for all L knows, she might be able to do it again this time and give Sky and Prism yet another attack. Maybe this plot point isn't as stupid as it might seem after all. Okay, back to this episode. There's this really creative bit where Sky and Prism show off their teamwork by trying to jump towards Kabaton's flying UFO Ronborg. Both Cures jump high into the air, then Prism gives Sky a mid-air boost, but just as Sky's about to reach the Ronborg, Kabaton moves it out of the way. There's some creative animation bits as Sky falls back downwards. Then, in order to save Sky's butt, Prism uses her projectiles as floating platforms for Sky to land on. After this well-done bit, the Ronborg charges up a giant laser and creates a giant explosion that knocks the Cures out. It turns out the Ronborg also comes with a tracking system, though, and it alerts Kabaton to L's location. And Tsubasa's for some reason. I get L appearing on the monitor because it's Kabaton's primary goal to kidnap L, but Kabaton has no idea who Tsubasa even is. Anyways, Tsubasa tells Kabaton that he won't let him capture L, but the tiny, defenseless bird proves no match for a ton of death lasers. Ultimately, the baby has to swoop in and rescue him. Unfortunately, though, the sling isn't meant for two. It goes much slower, allowing Kabaton to activate the Ronborg's vacuum beam and suck Tsubasa and L up. At last, the baby is his. Meanwhile, over on the Pretty Cure's side of the story, Ageha enters the episode and wakes Sky and Prism up from their space laser-induced comas. She fills them in on what's happened with L and comes up with a plan to get Sky up to the UFO to rescue her. Much like before, Sky and Prism jump up high together and Prism gives Sky a boost with her feet. Unlike before though, Prism gives an additional boost with a projectile, leading to Prism not having enough time to right herself and crash landing hard on the ground. That's gotta hurt. And what's more, even the added boost isn't enough to get Sky high enough, and she crash lands just as hard. So what I'd do in this situation is say, you know what, that's a wrap, let's try something else instead. Clearly, getting one of us all the way up there is a no-go. But one of us, Cure Prism, can shoot projectiles, and as far as any of us knows, those projectiles have no range limit. So how about Prism spams projectiles at the Ronborg until it gets weak enough to fall out of the sky, and then we both attack it when it goes low enough. But that's not what Sky and Prism do. Instead, despite Ageha pleading with them to not keep hurting themselves, they decide to keep trying Ageha's strategy until Sky finally makes it up to the Ronborg. Perseverance is a virtue, and sometimes it really is all that's needed to succeed, but other times it's better to work smarter, not harder. We cut to the inside of the UFO, where Kabaton comes to collect his precious prize, and the bird who is so stubbornly clinging to her. Tsubasa says that Kabaton will have to go through him to get to L, but Kabaton takes him down in a fight so one-sided that it isn't even shown on screen. Kabaton then leaves with L in tow and drops Tsubasa out of the Ronborg. But it isn't so bad because Kabaton neglectfully dropped the sling along with Tsubasa, allowing Tsubasa to not fall to his death. Back on the UFO, Kabaton says this long string of magic words to summon a portal to his home world, the Underg Empire, which is odd because he summoned the portal to Earth quickly and silently in episode 1. Come to think of it, why did he go to Earth instead of straight to the Underg Empire in episode 1? Did he intend to go to Earth for some reason? Or was he trying to go to the Underg Empire all along, but got lost when he got knocked unconscious by that asteroid? I'm assuming this will all get explained later in the show. So here's where this episode gets kinda stupid. Instead of immediately going through the portal and presenting his boss with a baby he's been trying to get the whole time, he just kneels in front of the portal for a very long time and talks to it. He says that he's finally brought his boss, the princess, and then asks for a ton of favors, like great magical powers and a 100-year supply of food in exchange for it. What's odd is that it's never been established that people can speak through portals, nor do we ever hear anybody responding to Kabaton. This would have been a great opportunity to give some much-needed attention to a villain other than Kabaton because honestly, he's starting to wear thin. It's completely unprecedented in the Pretty Cure franchise for just one villain to be on screen for this many episodes of a season. I wouldn't say that this whole thing is episode 4 levels of stupid because as far as Kabaton knows, there is literally nobody capable of stopping him from entering the portal once he finally does get around to it, so what's the point of putting it off for just a little longer? It's not like he knows perfectly well that there's a threat and is choosing to ignore it, but it's still blatantly clear that the writers only wrote him doing this really strange and uncharacteristic thing so that Tsubasa could swoop in and save Elle. And save her he does, but not without being overheard by Kabaton. This leads into a chase scene, but fortunately, Kabaton's been eating bananas throughout this episode, and this ends up biting him in the butt because he slips on a banana peel and falls. It's so odd seeing a modern anime using old cartoon gags, but this show makes it work. Tsubasa and Elle go out the window and Tsubasa tells Elle to leave. However, Elle refuses to leave Tsubasa behind. Kabaton then catches up and struggles to make it through the tight gap in the window. Conveniently for Tsubasa and Elle, Kabaton forgets about his small form that he used in episode 4. But Kabaton does make it far enough out the window eventually to grab Tsubasa, leading him to make a snap decision and grab onto the sling. They fly away together, but unfortunately, once again, the sling is too slow with 2 passengers. There's a plot hole here though, as Ready for Adventure points out. The sling is much slower when Tsubasa is in bird form than when Tsubasa is in human form, even though logically it should be the other way around. But no time to linger on that, because here we get to what might just be the most emotionally powerful moment in the entire season. Realizing that it's either him or Elle, Tsubasa chooses to sacrifice his own life in order to save her. As he falls to his death, he realizes he was never able to achieve his dream of flying after all. Well, unless you count riding in the sling, but I guess that isn't much different from riding another bird. Tsubasa really proves himself here as being absolutely dedicated to being Elle's hero. But fortunately, this isn't the end for him, as Elle uses her powers to make Tsubasa hover in the air. This was foreshadowed by episode 1, which showed Elle using her powers to slow down Sora's fall. However, unlike there, which took little effort from Elle, she's clearly straining herself here. Then, Kabaton shows up again. I wonder what he was doing while Tsubasa was busy knocking on death's door. Anyways, Tsubasa once again tells Elle to run away, but Elle refuses to let Tsubasa fall to his death. So, Kabaton is free to use a suction beam on Elle once again. Kabaton mocks Elle for being an idiot and not abandoning Tsubasa when she had the chance, and there's this pretty emotional scene where Elle cries and one of her tears lands on Tsubasa's face. At this point, Tsubasa's had enough. He screams at Kabaton to not make fun of Elle, and this causes a pen to appear inside of his chest. His chest glows brightly enough that even Sky, Prism, and Ageha can see it. Tsubasa has this really nice line where he says that what he'll remember in his final days won't be the people who made fun of him, but the face of Elle as she tried to protect him. But his final days are far from here. And after defenselessly throwing himself into the heat of battle for the sake of his princess, after being willing to literally give up his life for her, he finally grabs that pen that he very rightfully deserves at this point. And guess what else? Sky finally made it up to the UFO. Turns out perseverance on its own was enough after all. She punches the Ronborg so hard that the suction beam stops working, which allows Elle to summon an orange disc thingy for Tsubasa. And with that, Tsubasa transforms into Cure Wing. Tsubasa has the best transformation sequence of this season so far, which isn't saying all that much since the transformations this season are all so similar. However, there are a few standout moments here. The part after all Cure Wing's clothes have appeared, where he flies around and the orange trail appears behind him, is really neat. The split screen section actually has animations in it instead of being completely still like in Pure Prism's sequence. Wing's pose at the end is very cute, and I love the wings that flash behind him after he strikes his pose. The very first thing that Cure Wing does after transforming for the first time is take off and fly towards Elle, catching her in his arms. It's a really well-animated flying sequence. Cure Sky even bursts into tears after seeing Wing finally achieve his dream. Then, Wing saves Sky after her fist finally becomes dislodged from the UFO and she starts falling, and they come to the ground and everyone congratulates him. This whole thing is neat, but it takes 1 minute and 17 seconds, not counting a 6-second flashback that Wing has to his dad, and Kabaton does literally nothing the whole time. I get that Wing's flying around all over the place, but couldn't you at least try to shoot him out of the sky? Or maybe, once he's down on the ground and just standing there, shoot him then? I don't know, just do something. Kabaton eventually does remember that he exists, and he charges a giant death laser. But after a really cute shot of Elle cheering him on, Wing leaps back into action, and we get to see his attack. What's Wing's attack called? Wing Attack. How clever. Fortunately, despite the name, it's actually really good. In fact, it's even better than Sky Punch. The background turns into a bunch of really cool looking orange and white action lines as Wing launches himself away from the camera. Then, we cut to a gigantic setting sun surrounded by clouds where it looks like the whole sky is on fire. Wing launches himself upwards and then back downwards in a trail of flame. Then, in a burst of feathers, he collides with the Ronborg, leaving a fiery mark on the target. Wing Attack literally sets Kabaton's pants on fire, leading to him teleporting away. It also causes the Ronborg to sustain enough damage to fall out of the sky. So, it's finally low enough for Sky and Prism to finish it off with Updraft Shining. But the question is, since Kabaton didn't go skin and bones, why wasn't Wing Attack enough to finish the Ronborg off by itself? I'm starting to think that the show's just never going to acknowledge the skin and bones thing ever again. Before we move on to the very end of the episode, I wanted to point out that this whole episode-spanning fight scene takes place at sunset and the entire sky is orange. I love the visual storytelling here. It fits in so well with Cure Wing's theme color. Okay, so that's it. Our ending theme cure for this episode is, of course, Cure Wing. And that's all I have to say. Overall, my thoughts on this episode were mixed, but overall positive. I'll get what I didn't like out of the way first. The part where Kabaton doesn't go through the portal is clearly contrived just so that the heroes can beat him, especially since in episode 1, he goes through the portal immediately. If he'd done his whole asking for the luxury suite thing back in episode 1, Sora would have been able to snatch Elle back out of Kabaton's hands back in Skyland, and the whole plot of the show might not have even happened. Again, it's not as stupid as episode 4 because Kabaton had no way of knowing that Tsubasa wasn't dead, but it still sticks out like a sore thumb. What is as stupid as episode 4 is Kabaton not attacking for almost a minute and a half while Cure Wing is busy saving Elle and Sky. Also like episode 4, this could have been easily fixed. This whole sequence was already awesome enough to watch, but imagine how much cooler it would have been if Wing was dodging death lasers from the UFO the whole time. Then, when he touches down onto the ground and Agaha and Pure Prism compliment him, what if we had Kabaton charging his giant purple laser during that part rather than after, explaining why he doesn't attack them while they're just standing there? Alright, now for what I liked about this episode. Tsubasa is officially awesome. Remember how I complained in episode 4 about how Mashiro didn't have to struggle at all to earn her pen compared to Sora? Well, for Tsubasa, it's quite the opposite. Not only did he, like Sora, go up against a gigantic monster and its magically and physically gifted summoner untransformed, but he has nowhere near as much training as Sora has. On top of that, he went far beyond the typical Pretty Cure's willingness to risk their life. He literally chose to die in order to save Elle. This is a personal preference of mine, but I really like it when otherwise lighthearted shows like Pretty Cure get really dark like this. Some might say that it doesn't fit with the franchise, but I say that it raises the stakes and makes the story much more engaging. Also, Tsubasa wasn't the only one to be awesome. Elle, despite being a baby, was really cool too. She literally saved Tsubasa's life on multiple occasions, even at great risk to herself. Best baby ever. Finally, the fight this episode was well done. From the great teamwork between Sky and Prism, to the awesome flight animation for Wing, to the epic Wing attack, there's all sorts of things to delight the eyes this time around. So despite the episode's faults, I can't help but give this one a thumbs up. But I'm not done yet. The Hirogaru Sky website has been updated yet again. There's this one update that actually happened weeks ago. They added pictures of Sora's and Mashiro's school uniforms to the website, but there's an even bigger update that happened after episode 9 aired. Cure Wing's page on the site finally has more information than just some images, his name, and his catchphrase. Oddly, in episode 8, when Tsubasa first debuted, there was no information on Tsubasa added to the site at all. I thought they were gonna make a page for him in the Skylands section, kinda like Agaha has a page in the supporting characters section, even though she's almost certainly going to become Cure Butterfly eventually. But I guess they didn't want to create a separate Tsubasa page, only to delete it 1 week later. Anyways, we now know that Tsubasa's last name is Yunagi. We also have a picture of Tsubasa's human civilian form as well as a picture of his bird form. In the character bio, we see that his voice actor is Ayumu Murase, a voice actor with an absolutely ridiculous amount of roles in various anime. Tsubasa's bio says, a 12-year-old boy from the Puni bird tribe of bird-shaped fairies. He's part of a race that can't fly but can transform into human forms. Longing to fly, he learned about the existence of aerodynamics in Sorashido City and is looking for a method by which to fly in the sky. He transforms into the Pretty Cure of Wings, Cure Wing. Finally, his birthday is May 21st, which means his sign is Gemini and his birthstone is Emerald. So yeah, congratulations for sitting through this whole info dump. This video is finally over.